Councilors, welcome to the June 10th budget review session, Council of the Whole. Tonight we are doing the Community Development Department, which includes Economic Development Division, Housing Division, Planning Division, and the Building Division. Mr. Streb, welcome.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you. My name is David Streb. I'm the acting director of the newly created Community Development Department. Several significant changes have occurred as a result of the recently approved reorganization ordinance, including the removal of information technology responsibilities and the addition of economic development, building and zoning to our existing responsibilities. These existing responsibilities also include service to the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and Disability Commission, strategic planning initiatives, the Community Development Block Grant Program and Home Program, the administration of competitively awarded grants, housing rehabilitation, and project management that results from programs and grants that we administer. The Community Development Department will include the following divisions: Economic Development, Housing and Development, Building and Zoning, and Planning. I will be meeting with the mayor and my new staff to discuss each person's roles and responsibilities under the newly created department. Combining these functions will make us more efficient, allowing us to more effectively respond to development inquiries and applications. Spurring new economic growth is the #1 goal of this department and is the city's best hope for strengthening its tax base and improving the quality of life for all of its citizens. I've been told there have been some changes to the proposed budget from what is before you. On page 34, the Economic Development Division, the proposed FY09 budget reflects the elimination of the IDC director position and the creation of an economic development manager. I've since reached agreement with the current director and the mayor to supplement that item with sufficient CDBG economic development funds to fully fund this position and thereby retain for the city the knowledge and experience of the person in that position. In addition, I understand that funding has been found to retain the local building inspector position. These two changes will be reflected in the supplemental budget that is being prepared for council. Our goals for fiscal year 09 include the following: strategic planning initiatives designed to encourage private investment, improve the downtown commercial district, and increase the city's tax base. These initiatives include the expedited permitting program for priority development parcels, the implementation of an interdepartmental permit tracking program, the development of a smart growth zoning district, the development of a business park, and the Elm Street residential housing initiative. The continued application for and administration of competitive grants for economic development and infrastructure rehabilitation, such as CDAG grants, MORE grants, PWED grants, park grants, and others as they become available. And ensuring that applications and permits are responded to promptly and efficiently, sending out the message one customer at a time that the city of Fitchburg is a friendly and fair place to do business. During the past year alone, the Office of the Planning Coordinator successfully managed more than $5 million in state and federal grants. The Economic Development Office has also received several major economic development grants for the city. Together with building department personnel, we hope to achieve even greater economic development gains for the city. Dan Curley of the Economic Development Division, Michael Gallant of the Building and Zoning Division, and Larry Casassa of the Housing and Development Division are here tonight to briefly discuss their divisions. Following their remarks, I want to bring to your attention several items regarding the Planning Division budget as presented. Mike? Larry?
Excuse me, did you have a question, Councilor Hay, prior to?
I'll wait after this, Mr. Chairman.
Fine. Gentlemen?
Good evening. Do you want to go first? I can go first, Mike. Okay.
Mr. Curley?
Good evening, councilors. I'd just like to briefly talk about some of the things that we'll try to focus on this year from the Economic Development Division. We'd like to continue to identify local barriers that hinder business development in the city and work cooperatively with city leaders in removing those barriers wherever possible. One example of this is the implementation of the 43D expedited permitting. It will be my suggestion to work on pre-permitting these sites as much as possible and attracting companies focused in life sciences, medical device, and renewable energy to locate in this new business park. We need to identify the requirements of these industries so that we can respond to their inquiries more quickly wherever we can fulfill those needs. Hopefully, the process developed for the priority development sites can be used to promote economic development throughout the city. We also need to focus on the entrepreneurism. This year, the city departments, in cooperation with the Pioneer Institute, has developed a guide to encourage entrepreneurs to locate in the city of Fitchburg by presenting them with a clear path to establishing their business. I don't know whether all councilors have seen this booklet or not, but it's available on the Discover Fitchburg website as well as in the Economic Development Office. And I'll touch on one last function of the office that Dave Streb already mentioned, and that's the function of identifying and applying for funds to help the city reach its goals to bring business here, increase the commercial and industrial tax base, and create jobs for the citizens of Fitchburg. We will work diligently to obtain funds for infrastructure programs like the MORE grant, the Community Action Development grants, and Public Work for Economic Development resources. I just want to note, sometimes people say, why did we spend grant money on this? When we go out and obtain these grants, that money is going to be spent somewhere anyway. What we're really doing, our function is to recapture the taxpayers of Fitchburg's money and bring it back to the city for projects that the city needs. Thank you.
Mr. Gallant?
Yes, the building division, along with following the guidelines of Mass General Laws, Chapter 143, Section 3, contributes to the protection of the public and helps keep the unique character of the city of Fitchburg through the enforcement of the state of Massachusetts building codes and zoning ordinance by incorporating the following principles of customer service. Building division will strive each day to serve the public by providing a modern website designed to help answer all questions from builders, architects, and others. We also plan on working with new permit tracking systems that will help keep all of the other departments informed with current data of the permits, complaints, and other zoning issues. Employee development for the building division will also be an important part in maintaining an environment which is positive, supportive, and safe so that the employees can creatively and effectively enforce the code and provide compliant services to the public, and in keeping the inspectors up to date with current codes by providing continuing education and maintaining certification and licensing.
Thank you. Mr. Casassa?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Housing and Development Division continues to be funded by the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Program, and it's designed to operate at no cost to the city. In fact, these programs reimburse the city more than $46,000 each year in rent and for auditing, purchasing, and treasurer services. The administrative budget under the CDBG program also covers the costs of applying for and implementing the many housing, community, and economic development grants received by the city, accounting for more than $5 million in receipts over the past year alone. In the coming year, in addition to implementing 2 community development action grants for Sawyer Passway and Putnam Place, an urban self-help grant for Coolidge Park, and a brownfields cleanup grant for the Central Steam Plant, the Housing and Development Division will also focus its efforts on the growing crisis of foreclosed and bank-owned properties, a crisis which has hit Fitchburg especially hard, making it the 4th highest community overall in the state in that category. These efforts will provide new homeownership opportunities and stabilize existing rental properties, rehabilitating those properties which can be saved and demolishing those which can't, creating a model for implementation which we hope can then be implemented in other city neighborhoods which have also been hard hit by this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Prior to getting into the individual line items, I believe that Councilor Hay has a question.
If I could though, Counselor, I did want to just finish up with one particular item, just to point out an anomaly on the budget that was submitted. On page 32, in the middle section of that page, it appears that the total percentage in our payroll category represents a 28% increase in fiscal year '08. I was approached by a city councilor who suggests that I, in my introductory remarks, make sure I clarify that point. This number failed to take into account the cable fund revenue, which are city funds. And if you include that cable fund revenue, the change from FY08 is actually minus 25% due to the loss of the GIS-MIS analyst. The only real change between the two fiscal years are step increases for 4 employees. I wanted to make sure that was clarified. Additionally, in the bottom section, there's a different sort of error, but an error nonetheless. And I shouldn't say it's an error, but it's misleading because of the magnitude of the numbers. It shows a 26% increase in planning expenses because the fringe benefits are shown now in planning expenses. This amount represents an increase in the fringe benefits from city-funded employees. The actual city expense total that's traditionally presented to council is $7,450, which is unchanged from the previous year. I was advised to make to point out those two situations. Now, any of us would be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Fine, Councilor Hay.
Dave, in your opening statements, you were talking about 2 positions, an IT and an inspector's position that were in the supplemental budget will be there that aren't here now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Are those new?
It's actually not about IT. It was the IT was taken away. It was a function that was taken away from my department, and brought into my department, of course, was economic development and building and zoning. The 2 changes were the economic development manager and the the local building inspector. And those were, I'm advised by the mayor, will come forward to city council as in the supplemental budget, but they are not new positions. They're existing employees.
They're existing positions that are somewhere else in the budget that are just being transferred?
On page 34, if you look at the middle set of rows, you see the IDC executive director for FY09 is zeroed out. And then the economic development manager is put in at a lower amount of money. In discussion with the mayor and with the IDC executive director, we worked out that we can supplement that amount with community development block grant economic development funding and meet the requirements of the position so as not to add to the city's budget, but still retain that position.
We'll have an IDC executive director instead of an economic development manager?
The other way around.
The
Economic Development Manager funded previous level.
But it'll be funded at the IDC executive director amount?
That's still being discussed right now.
So that is not a solid figure that's in here right now.
As you can see with the planning division, right now we're only considering what the net costs are to the city. So right now we're looking at the IDC executive director position no longer exists because there is no industrial development commission under the reorganization plan.
Right, but my point is, we had the IDC executive director zeroed out, we had the economic development manager in, and now what we're going to do is take CDBG money to pay the economic development manager the amount that we used to pay the IDC executive director.
That may or may not happen. The last conversation I had is to look at how much, if any, CDBG funds we could use to supplement this in order to make the salary attractive to retain the type of services we need for this position.
And the second one was a building inspector, Dave? And that's not an added position?
That's the local building inspector that's on
And that was my error in moving public facilities out of the building division. I moved a position which exists, a local building inspector position, along with that, except with the funding difficulty that we have, we're not able to fully implement a public facilities division. So I meant to move it back, but instead I accidentally zeroed out the local building inspector, and I still have a new position of public facilities. So it was really the same person, it's just different positions. So you'll see an add over here and a minus over here.
Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Two questions. First one, piggybacking off Councilor Hay, we're going to fund an economic development manager at $50,000, and we're going to fund an IDC executive director or another position from CDBG. That's what's being discussed. So we're going to have an economic development manager and another person, or just one person?
Just one person.
Okay, and so we're not going to be funding $50,000 out of the budget? Or
We are
that's-
going to be.
Okay. So what was the portion again about CDBG? I'm sorry.
I showed the IDC executive director here because I wanted to show consistency with fiscal year 2007, 2008. So in the previous years, we have one person in an economic development role. That role was a IDC executive director. That position no longer exists. So in the reorganization, that position was eliminated, and the economic development manager was installed. That transition process, of course, is going to take some finessing for a few reasons. First is we don't have the funding on the city side to fully fund at previous levels. And second is it's a whole different department. Everybody is in a different department working in different functions. All of those things, if we started from scratch, no offense, but if we started from scratch, it would be easier to envision. But by utilizing existing staffing for union reasons, for contract reasons, for negotiation reasons, for transition reasons, some of the details have still yet to be worked out. But I allocated $50,000 from the general fund for this position. Just like in many of the planning positions, we've allocated really $0 from the general fund for this position. Should we find other funds to supplement the economic development manager position, given that we potentially have some CDBG changes, for example, the GIS, MIS analyst that's been moved out of planning. That was partially funded by CDBG dollars. That role has changed, again, because of the reorganization plan. We may have some monies left over to supplement salaries to make that salary more competitive.
Okay, so that 50,000 will be increased
It's just the city side.
potentially with CDBG money?
Without CDBG money.
Without CDBG money, okay. So that will be probably higher. My next question is about office supplies on page 32. I'm trying to understand where the FY08 budget expense, the 38,000, where did that number come from? I'm looking at the planning department's budget this year, and office supplies says only $800, and I looked at the IDC, and were there line items that were grouped together to make that 38?
David,
I was trying to figure out where that number came from.
It says office supplies, 38,000, budget expense. Now, I know in the planning department budget, there is a line item for support of city computers, which I don't see here anymore, but I'm trying to understand why it's 38,000 and not $800 like it says in the budget reports.
You know, I tried to track that down and today. The fact that they started adding in other elements that weren't traditionally in the budget caused some level of confusion for me. I'm sorry, I don't have a very good answer for you on that. But I know that the amount that we're requesting from the city remains unchanged from previous years and does not include the two IT rather large items of the internet access and the city computer support expenses that have now been transferred to the finance department.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, because it says FY08 budget expense.
I think what might have happened was that they used the payments that we make for rent from the CDBG and home programs and considered those office expenses because they're payments to the city for the use of City Hall by those programs.
Can that be confirmed?
We can certainly provide a breakdown of what that is, but it does include the items that he's talking about. The implementation of the CDBG programs, the copy machines are actually still in this one. I kept a lot of stuff in here because it's CDBG and home reimbursable. So it's the ink. It's the multiple copiers, it's the multiple printers, it's the plotter, it's all that expensive ink and paper and services to produce the reports. It's the things like the flashlights and the things that Mr. Green uses. The equipments when you determine if there's lead and asbestos and all that stuff to implement these inspections. And
Could I request that we get a breakdown of what that 38,000 consists of, and also to see what we've actually spent against that 38,000?
And also note that because that's almost 100% reimbursable. If you cut their expenses by $1,000, we get reimbursed $1,000 less. And I think by looking at those services, you can make a better determination of if you want to make cuts.
Thank you.
Councilor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. The acting community development director position, that's a brand-new position, is it not? Technically, it is.
Technically, yes.
So it doesn't exist in the FY07,
And I believe that's reflected.
but it has a salary listed for FY07. So if it's a new position, I understand. But does that entitle to a $3,080 step increase immediately?
Well, I think the thinking was that that's the step increase that I was due last year, and so I think they felt that it was warranted for this year, given the significant increase in healthcare costs and gasoline costs and other costs that we're all experiencing.
Okay, and
I can't be certain.
the deputy community development director position, that's also a brand-new position, right? Is that
We're having some discussion internally about those exact points, actually. Does that really constitute a brand-new position? It's really the same person? and
what position is that
That's
taken over?
It's essentially the deputy planning coordinator. And it's just a different title because there's no office of the planning coordinator.
Okay. In the economic development division there, I read the FY08 accomplishments and the items listed under the FY09 budget priorities. Is there any items in these two categories that can't be covered under the planning division? There seems to be a duplication in job description, isn't it?
I think we're really still working out those relationships and breakdowns into the divisions that were referenced in the ordinance. But I think it's safe to say we need to have additional meetings on that very point.
My question is, do we really need an economic development division? Has there been any economic development that has occurred in the last 2 or 3 years?
Well, I would say yes, there has. I would defer that question, though, to the current economic development director to Sure, but yes, I can say with certainty that there has been.
Mr. Strub, the mayor would like to make a comment.
Just to supplement Mr. Strub's answer in terms of economic development, from my personal experience, there is very little duplication of effort. There's complement of effort between the former planning office and the former economic development offices. But if you could see from the planning division, very few of their salaries are not CDBG funded. And if they're CDBG funded, there's very limited activities that one can do. We really only have one person that deals with businesses in this community, and that's Mr. Curley. We have a lot of businesses in this community of things that we don't see here. We probably get calls on a weekly, I do, but probably on a daily basis of companies that are in trouble, companies that need access to state funding, need access to loans, need access to workforce training. As noted by the Industrial Development Commission to me, I actually only took a portion of their very, very thick report, which I hope they didn't take too much offense to. I just couldn't fit a 12-page report into a budget of this size. But I personally know, having dealt in that field, that there are hundreds and hundreds of jobs that are saved. There is tens of millions of dollars that are saved in this city because of the work that we do to help businesses get the access to the technical and the monetary support that they need. It's hard to quantify that here. As we'll also be seeing, there's millions and millions of dollars of grants that we receive that we would not receive without Mr. Curley. He was instrumental in the $1.5 million that DRS received to build a test facility. Hopefully, we'll be seeing millions more come down the pipeline fairly soon. We would not get that if we didn't have an economic development division, because that's what that particular division does, not the planning office. We also have a commercial industrial base that's 15% of the tax revenue. It used to be 40%. In terms of who actually pays attention to that 15%, hopefully making it back into the 40% one day. Again, that falls to one individual in the city. So this is something I would be very wary of making any changes to, because this is where we actually look at making investments in the city. This would be our an R&D department of some sort. So this is one area that is incredibly valuable to the city, and I wish we could fund it at a greater level.
Have we seen any increase in our commercial or industrial tax base based on the accomplishments that you just stated?
We have. As a net, it's been about the same. But if we've had about 40 years solid decline in that area. And actually, this is a discussion I had today with various state agencies, which is there are some cities that have multiple people in their economic development division. They will have one person just on business retention, and they'll have one person just focus on business attraction, and then they'll have other economic development officials who are focused on putting together marketing programs, business microloan type programs, and then they might have somebody in charge who would look at things like building industrial parks. So we have that all embodied in one person. I mean, this is an area where I would love to see us increase capacity. It's one of the things I've made statements over and over again to the state, which is we're so busy because we have a city of mature industries. Mature industries means things like papers and tool companies. Those companies face infinite more difficulties than some of the newer companies. We have so many of those here, we have to pay particular attention or we're going to lose those jobs. And we also have that old infrastructure. So if we were Acton, we would have had 50 people in 1950, and now they have the same amount of people we do now. So as people came, they are able to build brand new, build brand new, build brand new. What we have is we have infrastructure and companies that are well over 100 years old. So we are spending a lot of our time keeping those businesses, that money and those jobs here in the city. And if we had more capacity, we could retain those jobs so we don't lose hundreds of jobs more each year, and we could focus on attracting more jobs. So because we only have one individual and because there's no way that we could fund more, that was one of the reasons behind combining them with planning and with building, because they're complementary. So a few things that they can do is they can share resources. So if there is multiple loan pools, maybe they could have somebody who's looking at a housing revolving fund also look at a business loan pool because they're doing that same type of work. If I know that many of the issues that Mr. Curley deals with are permitting issues and trying to push things through City Hall by working hand in hand with Mr. Gallant and also with Mr. Streb, who came up with the idea to do the online combined permitting. I mean, that's going to make things infinitely easier. So just by combining these things, we have actually one department now that does a one-stop shop, rather than having one person who does a few steps over here and another person doing a few steps over there.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Joseph?
Are we going all three of these pages at once? Is that the plan
I
here?
was sitting here thinking about that. I'm not sure that's a good idea.
It just seems like we're all over the place. but
We are, and I think we should get back on track and go back to page 32, Planning and Housing, and take a look at the line items there and proceed from there rather than jumping around. But I do have several other councilors who have their hands up, and we could call on them. Councilor Caddy?
My question is going to be on page 36 on the building, if you want to wait.
Yeah, mine are on 34 and 36, so I have no questions on page 32.
Councilor Bowe?
Page 34.
My question here is on the personnel services on page 34. You have 2.5 positions. Half position for the downtown coordinator. Is this a position that is absolutely necessary?
Well, some of you may recall that council created this position for downtown businesses. I think it's extremely important to have a vital downtown, and I think that it's been a successful merger of the CDBG funding and some city funding to have a person that's a liaison and is available to work with downtown people and to help make downtown a vibrant place. But
Could you get along without this position?
I'd like to, I mean, how do I answer that question? Could the city get
Yes
along?
or no?
Could the city get along without that position? Really, that's your determination to make.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that I feel that the position is effective. I believe it was created by Councilor Joseph and former Councilor Straight, because they felt that it was important that the downtown is the lifeblood of the city, and for a very small investment, you have a position then that can help downtown people be more successful and help downtown become more alive and more vibrant. And I certainly think that it's been a successful position in the past several years, but obviously that's a determination for a council to make.
Well, I was just looking over the FY08 accomplishments. I don't see too much in there that has much of anything to do with the downtown coordinator.
That was,
Abbreviated, the mayor mentioned that she abbreviated what our accomplishments were. I certainly could provide the full booklet that we presented.
If you could get that information to Councilor Bowe, would be appreciated.
I think it's
I believe the CDBG money could be better spent on other things. Therefore, I'm going to make a suggestion that the position of downtown coordinator be eliminated. And also one economic development, personal services, the downtown coordinator, $10,000 be zeroed out.
Before we get back to page 32, Councilor Hay, did you have something?
Mine's an overall question. I'll wait until the end, Mr. President.
Okay,
Thank you.
so let's move to page 32, which is the planning and housing. Personal services request is a 155, 421 is the total, and the expenses 161, 371. I think Councilor, Mr. Streb explained the increases there, but do we have questions on that page? Anyone have questions on that page? Seeing none, we'll move to page 34, Economic Development. I believe Councilor Boivin has made a suggestion, which has been so noted when we go through the final review of the budget. Does anyone have questions on the Economic Development, page 34? Councilor Joseph.
I guess I just have a comment. I mean, this is the group that is marketing the city, again, not only just trying to maintain our current economic base, but also to increase our economic development. And when we have a budget of $67,000 in printing and advertising and office supplies, and if we're looking at marketing $100 million business, and we're marketing a $100 million business with $7,000 in printing and advertising and office supplies, that's, to me, is, if that money hasn't been used, then it's a sin that we've reduced it because it hasn't been used. But I would hope that every penny of that $7,000 is going into marketing supplies for the city for economic development. My question is this group, economic development, going to move out of its current location and reside back here in City Hall?
If that is determined to be the most effective and efficient way to deliver services, then yes.
So this isn't the plan right now, or it is to move them back here, or it is? I'm just looking at when we get on to page 36, where we've gone and eliminated a clerical, 1.5 clerical positions. Is it best to have this department in this building to help share the services?
That's where we're leaning towards right now, because we have lost 1.5 clerical positions. The clerical position currently stated in the economic development page 34 is for page 32, 34, and 36. So right now it is, nothing's been set in stone because we're still having those discussions on how things would work out, but that is the direction that we're going in.
Okay. Is the downtown coordinator's position going to be a stipend position, or is it going, or are you planning on looking to hire into that position?
I would like to see it be a stipend contractual position based on performance, based on what people's skill levels are, and be very detailed as to what our expectations are in terms of what we want to market, what our expectations are for bringing in dollars, for organizing events, for helping people attract loans, probably looking at job creation. So it'll be very specific things that we will tie this money to.
I just, in respect of my previous counselor's comments on the downtown coordinator's position, just angers me to no end that the person wouldn't see the benefit that we've gotten out of the last 3 years of our current downtown coordinator and the activity that she did single-handedly with a 20-hour budget, working 40-plus hours a week. Downtown has been highly publicized. The events that have happened downtown, which the openings of various venues in the city, have been highly publicized, and I think that we've all been invited to every ribbon-cutting ceremony that's taken place from a computer supply business that's taken place over on the Cellar Street, to the establishments that at the Boulder that's been reestablished in the Upper Common. So from one end of the city to the other end of the city, with the installation of the nice sign that is down by the garage, all of the signs that advertising all of the different businesses that are hanging from every flagpole here in the city. I just get highly insulted when somebody says that the downtown coordinator position is something that hasn't benefited the city and should be eliminated. But that's just my humble personal opinion. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I just wanted to state that I agree with Councilor Boisvert on that matter. At $10,000, could probably demolish another building in the city. And I just want to say that on record that I agree with Councilor Boisvert's comments. Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino.
I don't know if this is the time to bring it up because we're discussing your budget, but I'd like to get this straight. You're going to be the boss now of all of the other departments, right?
That's my understanding at this time.
As of the 1st of July.
Yes.
Now, but we were presented your budget tonight, but we already had in here the building budget. To you, Mr. Connery, when do we discuss that budget, or do we ever discuss it?
We'll be moving on to
We're
the
moving on to it next?
next page,
Well, I
yes.
wanted to be sure that we didn't forget it.
We will
Because it's
not,
also very complicated.
we will not forget
Don't know
it,
who's the chief
Councilor.
and the Indians anymore. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion on that particular page? Now, Councilor, page 36.
Now,
The Community Development Division, the building section. Questions on that page? Mr. Gallant is front and center. Councilor Caddy?
This question could be for Mr. Gallant or the mayor. If you go to page 36, Building Department, the red line, the local building inspector, it's my understanding that the local builder inspector is back. Is that correct? It's back in the budget?
Well, it would be once we have the supplemental budget accepted, is my understanding.
Yeah, the funding for this position is on a different page. I meant to put the 49,000 here, and I meant to zero out a number that's in the budget under public facilities.
That's okay, but it's back here again. In any event, it'll
It's-
eventually be back, so we'll have a building inspector again.
Correct. So if you cut the public facilities, then you'll just see an addition of the money.
So then my next question would be the building maintenance. If you refer to page 52, the building maintenance went to the Department of Public Works, but am I to believe now that the building maintenance will be back with the building department?
I've had discussions with each of the departments that are under public facilities, so Chief Roy knows that he's still in charge of his budget until we actually have a public facilities person. Chief Demore is aware that police are going to retain control of that item, and I've had discussions with Mr. Gallant that they will continue to oversee their current operations. With the really extensive reorganization, ideally, we'd like to jump right into that, except we can't. This is a $100 million organization, so we're going to take baby steps.
Okay, so under, again on page 52, building repair and care, City Hall, building, the first line would be building City Hall, the second would be building repair and care. Do those funds go back to the control of the building department?
Yes.
Okay. So in your supplemental budget, those will be returned until the time that you're able to find the monies for a public facilities manager.
That is correct. My understanding, though, is, and maybe Mr. Saracen can answer this, is it does not have to be in the supplemental budget unless you completely zeroed out this page.
Okay. All right, I'm fine with it, thank you.
Counselor Joseph?
What exactly is the plan for the reduction of the clerical staff in the building department?
My understanding at this time that we would have no clerical staff totally assigned to the building division, that we would be sharing whatever clerical staff would be available through the community development and economic development division or department.
And right now, you have, it says in the FY08 you have 1.5, but actually in this whole year, how many have you actually had?
Just one.
Just one.
One principal clerk.
And that the responsibilities that she has, can you just kind of highlight some of the responsibilities that she has?
Sure. The responsibilities that she has is keeping track on a weekly basis of the accounts receivable. That would be for permit fees or plumbing fees and electrical fees that are coming into the department. She keeps track of those and turns them into the treasurer's office. She also keeps track of also the payroll for the entire department. She keeps track of any of the contracts that we may have dealing with different services that we may need for the city, such as the cleaning crew that comes in and the payments to them. She takes care of all of accounts payable and pretty much takes care of all of the permit processing and sending out to the different contractors the permits and the constituents of the city.
I guess through you to the mayor, is there any provision in this budget for the zoning board clerk, a clerical person for support of the zoning, a board of appeals?
There is funding here for the zoning board chairperson, which my presumption in speaking with him that some of this would be used for not a clerical person, but for some support of expenses, and that the clerical of the entire department would have to somehow be integrated with that one clerical position for, I'm sorry, the clerical in this division would have to be integrated with that one clerical for the entire department. This was part of the streamlining that was necessary, given the financial situation of the city, to be able to share these positions.
I guess my concern is, again, with the zoning board of appeals, that we've come close to having to redo cases because proper notification hasn't gone out, and that has been shared by the board members, which again is not really something that should be done by the board members. Is there any assurance that we will have somebody doing clerical work for the zoning board of appeals?
That would depend on the prioritization of total duties of that one clerical person. The supplemental clerical, that can be done by other staff as determined by the department head and myself. And thinking about what the priorities would be for the entire department, I would say that preventing costly mistakes would be right up there at the top.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor, if I may comment on that also. I agree that one case in particular, notices were received by people 2 days after the hearing. No fault of Mr. Gallant, but that was brought up in the previous council that we really needed somebody to write the decisions and to send the notices out. I've always been an advocate for more personnel, not a lot of personnel, but more personnel for the building department, and I understand the situation we're in. We hear a lot of discussion about we need more police, we need more firefighters, but you know what? We need more people in every department. We just can't afford it right now, but that if there is a way Mayor to determine how we could find some money to fund just a part-time person who has some legal ability to write those decisions. I think that board would be very appreciative of it, and we would not be getting a problem with decisions or notices going out. That's just an observation.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
In those lines?
Yes.
There is there is a history of the Board of Health and the Building Department also working together. I mean, all the departments have worked together. There is a half-time person in the Board of Health. We could certainly discuss the economies of scale at a later point when the supplemental discussions come about making that a full-time and dedicating the other half towards the zoning in particular.
Thank you. Councilor Di Natale?
Thank you. I have questions on 4 line items. First one is overtime in the building department. Through May, only 42% of the account has been spent, yet next year we're doubling the account. I'd like to know why we're underspending that account by more than 50% and why we're doubling it next year.
I'll begin by saying that a lot of the busy time in terms of inspections, I've been extremely diligent on freezing spending, which in many cases means freezing activities. I did that out of necessity to make sure that we were in the black by the end of fiscal year 2008. It is one of my priorities, and I'm hoping it's a citywide priority, to do a lot more enforcement. And that is why I'm looking at continuing to keep this funding up as much as possible, because I see the returns on the investment of not just addressing the day-to-day activities, but really going after enforcement issues, especially in light of building foreclosures. Those are areas that we are going to need the increased services of the building department to check on vacancies, to check if there's illegal occupations, to check if things are boarded up correctly, and so on and so forth. So that's one of those items that you can compare to previous years, but circumstances have certainly changed given foreclosures and given that this is one area that I really want to make sure that the city emphasizes. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Mr. Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor. The other part of that is with the zoning, the overtime is also used for the traffic lights. This year, we have, over the fall, put a lot of time and effort into maintaining what we have and not having to put it into overtime. But there are occasions when we either get lightning strikes, like a couple of weeks ago we had 2 lightning strikes at one time on our traffic lights, one on the intersection of Laurel and Putnam and the other at the intersection of South and Winoosknock, where we had to call in overtime to get those up and running and try to avoid any accidents happening there. In the meantime, we just had another call-in of overtime for the intersection of Mechanic Street and Main Street, where we lost the controller. We are looking at the expenses that we have left in supplies for the traffic lights and try to make a supply of controllers. Controllers cost at an average of $3,000 a piece. So we'd like to, in time, change all the controllers over to the most modern type that we're using on the intersections on North and Main. But the overtime basically is for also the services that we render in trying to save in correcting electrical problems in police, fire, and DPW. Also, the overtime is used in other areas for plumbing inspector doing plumbing work, for also fire, police, and DPW and City Hall. And also we use the services of the local inspector for any emergencies or fire calls that come in after hours.
Why does it say revised expense $25,000? We're going to spend we're going to spend $18,000 in overtime in 1 month this year. The budget says revised expenses for overtime, $25,000, and through May, we've only spent $8,000. So we're going to spend $17,000 in 1 month. I understand the mayor's logic about foreclosures. This is another area where the last few years, personal services in '06 underrun by $10,000, '07 by $30,000, and I understand the spending freeze is in place. Again, this is an issue where we have $15,000 appropriated this year. If we gave $5,000 more next year, would we be in terrible shape? We were able to survive this year with less than 15. If we increase that to 20, are we going to be in bad shape, or even 25? I think 30 is excessive. So one of my suggestions for that is to reduce that line item by $10,000. My next question is regarding traffic signal maintenance and traffic signal lights. Traffic signal maintenance this year, warranted, there's a spending freeze. Only 18% of that account has been spent through May. And traffic signal lights only, that's actually running okay, but traffic signal maintenance, we've got 18% spent. So that's underrun so far by 82%, and we're level funding it. I don't think I need an explanation because I understand that we're cutting, we cut back. I would like to make another suggestion that the traffic signal lights be reduced by $5,000 and that the traffic signal maintenance be reduced by $5,000. And my last question or comment is on contracted services. What do we have encumbered right now for this line item? We have 62% spent through May, and we're saying that we're going to spend $14,000. So far, we spent $8,700. Are we going to spend $7,000 plus in 1 month?
I'd have to defer to Mike.
There has been a freeze, so we have tried to be very frugal in the spending this year. We're not trying to overspend or to look at this and to go over. A lot of these items, you know, we felt that if we could hold off in the spending, we would, and try to you know, try to hold off for another year. But in most cases, this is equipment that is now needed to be serviced or recontracted by next year. So we've gone through this year, and like I said, we've tried to hold off to the end of the year what we have left as far as traffic maintenance goes and the traffic signal lights. We'd be looking at Senate spending right now for this month probably close to $12,000 in the new controllers to be able to get us through for next year. In the contract services, that's our contract services for the software that we use in the permit tracking to keep that up to date. It's also the services for the copier, the fax, the scanner, and the equipment. Most of that equipment will be coming due for a recontract for next year.
And I appreciate the work you're doing to keep spending in line, as I am with the mayor. I'm very pleased with the spending freeze. I'm just looking at in terms of necessity, and are we going to survive if we don't have an extra $5,000? I'm pretty confident that we will survive without it, given our last 3 years of history. And I will leave the contracted services alone based on, is that $12,000 for the lights, is that a one-time hit? Is that going to be incurred next year? Is that a yearly occurrence?
It's hard to say because of different emergencies that may arise during the year, traffic knockdowns, accidents at the intersections, lightning strikes, power failures, that some years we may spend more, others we may spend less. It's if we can get through the year without spending, we try at the end of the year to stock up on the supplies so as to be able to keep them very well maintained and up to date. We have saved in the past 5 years we have brought the cost of electricity on the traffic lights almost cut in half. We saved over $45,000 in cost by changing all of the lights over from incandescent to LEDs, which have saved us quite a bit. So those are things that we try to upgrade with the money we have left at the end of the year.
And I bring these cuts to light just because I look at the spending totals for the last 3 years, and I look at what was given this year and what we're giving next year if these go through. And even with the cut in the overtime that I'd like to do, it still leaves over $5,000 more than what you were giving last year. So it's not like I'm suggesting we cut these line items below the pre-FY08 numbers. They're still getting increases. But I just believe that some of these increases are excessive, given the spending total histories. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
This is to the mayor. I had an appointment with Mr. Glant today, and his principal clerk must have been busy on the phone. During our meeting, Mr. Glant had to answer the telephone twice. I think that when you have a building commissioner, a local building inspector, a plumbing inspector, and a wiring inspector, you have to have a clerk. But I'm with you on trying to multitask or try to use a clerk for both economic development and the building department. But I don't know how you can do that if they're in two different locations, because it's on demand. You don't know who's going to come through the door. Economic development is going to go down to 2.5 people, one being the downtown coordinator. I don't know if Mr. Glant's office is big enough to take in 2 more people, but in order for this plan to work, I think you have to have that clerk in the same office as both of these entities. Whether or not one clerk can even do that, I'm not sure, but it seems like an impossible task to have that clerk in responsible for 2 different locations. So I'd like to support this with you, but I think we have to think about getting those 2 offices closer together so that they can, in fact, share the clerk when the demand is there. Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino.
The same thing is back to the clerk again. You know, I always notice in the budget that the people to go first are the clerks, the janitors, and the cafeteria workers. It always amazes me that the fat cats on the top don't get a hit. But anyway, after saying that, I'll go ahead. I say this every year anyway, so there's no news here. My question is to you, Mr. Streb. You have a clerk and a half, I believe, a woman who works part-time and a full-time clerk, right, in your budget? Do you have 2 clerks or 1?
I have one clerk that's half city and half housing.
And now, that clerk is going to be taking care of everything to do with the building department too?
Well, obviously, we need to have further discussions in-house. The latest thinking along those lines was to utilize the clerk in the Economic Development Office to support both the Economic Development Office and the Building Department.
Because if that's the case, she should be getting a $20,000 raise instead of taking something away. That person has to be absolutely educated in all the areas of both departments.
It's going to be a challenge, Council.
So to take away, you need to add, not to take away. It doesn't make any sense. Because this person now, in the clerical, in the building, she's equipped, she's learned the job, and she's good at doing it. And then you have your own clerk who's good at what they're doing, and you're all going to be in, and we're still going to get the 1 clerk, am I correct? How many clerks are we going to get when we're finished at the end of the day?
My understanding is that we're going to have a net reduction of 1.
And so you're left with 1?
Among all 3 departments.
So you're left with 1?
We'll be left with 2.
Okay, 2. They'd have to...
1.5 if you're only talking the city budget.
1.5, okay. Because they must be very good at what they're going to be doing, because they'd have to be a genius to keep this going, because all of you all have to learn to work together, and each one knows what their own job is, and now it doesn't make any sense to get rid of clerks at this time. So I wouldn't support that at all. But I am very glad to see the local building inspector is coming back in. But I want to ask about the custodian. Where will the custodian be housed? In which department?
I believe right at this time, the custodian would be under my jurisdiction, under the building division.
He'd still be under your jurisdiction?
Correct.
Okay. And the plumbing inspector would be under your jurisdiction?
Correct.
And the wire inspector would be under your jurisdiction?
Correct.
And all of the people that work in your office would be still under your jurisdiction. So where does Mr. Shreb come into the picture?
He would be above me.
He'd be your boss?
That's correct.
And then he'd be the boss of all of them?
Correct.
And Mr. Shreb, you're trained in knowing everything about the building and inspection and all of that? You know all that?
Well, I'm learning quickly.
But
Don't have the certification that Commissioner Gallant has.
what is Mr. Gallant's certification? What is your certification? Yes.
My certification as a building commissioner for the state of Massachusetts. I'm certified with the state.
Okay. So therefore, Mr. Shreb, you'll have to do a lot of training to know what he does so that you can be his boss.
I find this whole affair very challenging, Counselor, but I think we all have to pull together and do the best we can under difficult circumstances.
I just want to sure I get the picture so that I know what's happening here. And are you all going to stay in your own offices, or are you going to get closer together so you can all work together?
In my opinion, we need to get closer together, and we need to work together. We need to be geographically close so that we have some efficiency in sharing personnel and cross-training. Because when we're going to be combined, certain people are going to be gone sometime, so other people are going to have to know what those functional job responsibilities are so that we can provide better service given the staff reductions.
But for instance, when Mr. Gallant goes on vacation, who's going to take his position for them 2 weeks? Not saying that he gets 2 weeks, probably get a week. But if he gets a week, who is going to be the expert to take over for him?
These are all things that we're going to have to work out in the coming months.
It's a big job.
I understand that, Counselor.
And I love the one-stop shopping. I think it's great. I just think it's a great idea, and it's a long time coming. I just don't know how, I mean, I'm looking forward to see how it all works out, but I think at this point to start getting rid of clerks, I think it's devastating. Thank you very much.
Councillor Joseph.
When would it be fair to talk about building electricity, heat, and fuel? Is that under Public Works, or is that now?
That's under the public facilities, I believe, isn't it? It's under the public facilities.
Okay, because the only one that doesn't fall under that is the library, and the library has its own heating fuel, which is put basically, it says 22% decrease from what was the revised budget for this year. In light of the situation that's happening at the library, is that going to be further reduced from 35,000 to less with the 3 days that it'll be open?
It has been reduced to reflect the closure of the library 4 days a week. Some of these things are in flux because they are not my ultimate decision. For example, I can determine the level of dollar funding for a department, but for the Council of Aging and for the Board of Library Trustees, they determine the allocation. So should they, for example, choose to allocate more towards staff and to close the library down to 2 17-hour days, they can make those decisions. All those things would have impacts on what heating and fueling would be. That's why I actually kept those line items within their budget, because their choices will affect those line items. And I didn't want to have a choice in one department affect the line item in another budget.
Okay, I guess I would just prefer to have the electricity and fuel under one page for the discussion of, or for the determination of what the heating and fuel is going to be for the city. So there's just one department that's separated out of all of the departments.
Yeah.
So,
That is the intent. We do not have a public facilities person right now to utilize that expertise to make that determination. So for all intents and purposes, myself and the finance team, from a monetary standpoint, was trying to wear the public facilities hat to create this from happening. So because of the reorganization, because we have new departments and new divisions and no people to fill them, in some cases, we're trying to put the cart before the horse. We can't afford the horse at the moment, so we're trying to figure out what that cart would be, should there be a horse to pull it.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Saracen would like to comment on that, Counselor.
Yeah, there is a little history on why the library is, those expenses are in their department. And in the past, it was important that they be in that department because of us maintaining the minimum funding. So maybe because of that, it was left this year intact.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to echo the thoughts of President Conry and to Councilor Joseph about the Zoning Board of Appeals. I was at their meeting earlier tonight. There was still no clerk or any clerical help over there. Most of the meetings that I attend, every other board has clerical help. This very important board does not. I think it's crazy. We've been going without one for a year. The board members have gone above and beyond, but it's got to stop. We've got to get them some help in there. Also, the building commissioner chairs the insurance commission.
That's correct.
How long has that been going on?
It's been going on for many years, prior to me even coming on in 1994. It's been that. It was under the Code of Fitchburg as the building commissioner chairing that. Mainly under public buildings and public facilities. It's for the insurance of the buildings and the liability.
My next question was why, but you've answered that, Mike, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Chairman, President.
Any other questions on page 36? Or any other questions to do with the Community Development Department? Questions for people representing those departments or the mayor? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you.
One moment, please. Councilor Tran, did you have a question?
Mr. President, earlier we had a finance meeting, and in the finance meeting, we found out that there was $470,000 available, and it was transferred to the DPW department. Can I get a breakdown on where the money came from?
Mr. Saracen, could you?
If you could get that to me by end of this week.
Councilor Caddy.
Question for Mr. Saracen from last week, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Saracen, last week, a person asked me this question, I didn't know how to answer him. Last week, you said that the city collects the interest from the Helmy Johnson Fund. Why do we do that? Why doesn't the Helmy Johnson Fund collect the interest from the Helmy Johnson Fund?
Years ago, we got a ruling from Attorney Ciota back when he was the solicitor years ago. And that ruling, which I could provide a copy, stated that the way it was turned over to the city was more like a gift. So because it's a gift, it didn't reap the same benefits as a trust fund. And that determination stated that the interest does go to the general fund. So it was based on that ruling.
Could it stay with the fund, or by law, does it have to go to the city?
I believe it has to go with the city. I could dig out the law and provide it if you...
All right, again, I didn't know how to answer that,
No,
because it didn't seem
it stated that the interest stays in the general
All right,
fund.
thank you.
Councilor Clark?
President, thank you. Just a quick note that on Thursday night, I'll be holding a Ward 1 meeting at the South Street Elementary School at 6 p.m. Everyone is invited, and Chief DeMora will be my guest. That's Thursday night at 6 p.m. Thank you.
And I'd like to remind the councilors that Governor Deval Patrick will be here at City Hall tomorrow afternoon. 2:30 p.m. Hopefully, he'll be doing some gifting, I don't know. But he will be here at 2:30 in the afternoon, and everyone is invited. I believe we had a motion to adjourn, and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.